Well, hello there, Springfield Faith Center family. My name is Brandon. I am the lead pastor here, and welcome to another podcast or episode of our podcast, however you say that, but we're going strong now. And like I said, my name is Brandon. Today we have a very special guest, but before we introduce her, as always, to my very far left.
Yes, my name is Daniel. I'm the associate pastor here, and back from a little bit of camping vacation. I've missed a couple of weeks. Yeah.
The sage, the wise sage. And then today we have a special guest, and her name is?
I'm Shayna, and I'm the Kids Ministry Director here at Springfield Faith Center.
Yeah. So glad you guys are tuning in again. We took a break last week because we had Vacation Bible School, and so the whole sanctuary was turned into like the most amazing, fun, hype kid area of all time, and so we wanted to give Shayna some space and time to be able to decorate the sanctuary. So we just said, you know what, we're going to pause for a week and we'll come back next week. And so we are here. And apparently we all called each other and said wear black shirts because we are matching. This was not planned. If you're watching, you can see we're obviously look all alike, but if you're listening, we all have black shirts on and like plain black shirts. So this is cool.
Brought another shirt with me to change into this morning. But I didn't clear it with my wife, and then I put it on, and I thought, oh, that doesn't work at all. And so I switched back into the black T-shirt, and not even realizing that there was going to be a theme this morning.
It was ordained.
It was.
I brought another shirt also, but mine's also black, so.
I did not bring another shirt, so this had to be what it had to be. As always, we like to start off our segments our podcast with the segment of Beyond Sunday, where we take the sermon or the message from Sunday, we go beyond to see how it applies to our lives. We're in a week number 3 of Straight Outta Context series, and Pastor Tony, who is away today, he was able to speak on Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 through 5, the good old Christians shouldn't judge section, or Christians can't judge section. And so he talked about the context of that passage. And so, Daniel, I want to start off by asking you the question, like we always answer, is what stood out to you?
Yeah. So the thing that stood out to me was Tony clarified, and this is actually, this is kind of an opinion or a perspective that I've had for a long time, that I think it's really easy to misunderstand the word judge or judgment in a general sense. But I remember looking it up in the dictionary when we were talking about doing this series, and we knew that Tony was going to do that section in Matthew about judgment. I remember looking it up in the dictionary because I thought, I'm curious if the dictionary definition agrees more with kind of what I have in mind. And I found that it did, and it was what Tony talked about on Sunday morning, that the word judgment really just means to have an opinion about something, to make a distinction between one thing and another thing, that it doesn't necessarily carry any kind of a value statement with it inherently. Judgments can be positive, they can be negative, but really at its core, judging something is just having an opinion about it, having a perspective about it, having making some kind of a distinction or a determination. And in that regard, judgment in a general sense gets a very bad rap in our culture, in our society, that there's this very popular opinion that judgment is always bad. But the truth is we have judgments all the time. We do it every single day.
Right, you judged whether or not you should wear a black shirt today.
That's exactly right. You go to the grocery store and you look at the cereal on the aisle, and I judge between, what is going to work better for my family. And those are all judgments, every single thing that we do like that. Obviously, and Tony alluded to this on Sunday morning, the problem is if we take those judgments and then carry them in an unhealthy direction, if we use them as fuel for unloving behavior, un-Christ-like behavior in one way or another. But talking about judgments themselves, we've got to be aware that judging something is a very normal, natural human behavior, and it's something that God has created us to do. The goal is not to not ever judge. The goal is to judge in health, which I appreciated kind of was the thrust of Tony's message on Sunday morning. So
yeah, the how to judge is really the point there. Because it's almost like Jesus is saying, hey, if you're going to get into this whole judgment thing, watch out, because it's going to come back to you. I think it's not don't judge. It's as you enter in, be aware. Be aware of what's coming back at you. Kind of like, I don't know, this is a weird stretch of analogy, but I think it works. Like, it's like in playing sports, like if you're going to start trash talking,
Yes.
beware of what's going to come back to you. It's not like you can't trash talk, but once you start trash talking, just beware of what people will start of what is going to come back to you, like even worse, And so it's almost like as you're entering in, just realize there's a way to do it and there's a way not. Again, but yeah, and at the end of that section in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus says, "Watch out for false prophets." In other words, judge if there's a false prophet or not. So he couldn't say, "Don't judge," and then watch out for false prophets. It wouldn't make sense, because he's trying to say, look, as you're figuring out how to live this life in this new kingdom I'm talking about, you're going to have to make some really good judgments. Just know that when you do, it's going to be the same way you judge, it will be brought right back to you.
Right.
So, All right, Shayna, your turn. What stood out to you?
Well, Daniel, I love what you just said, because it leads into what stood out to me, which was Tony's first point of learning to align yourself with Christ's heart before making any of those judgments, and just trying to always bring it back to Jesus and how can I be looking at this from a more healthy perspective. And because it's so easy for us to just, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to pick the cereal I want, or I'm going to whatever. But then that can so easily bleed into, well, now I'm judging the person next to me.
Yeah.
And if we're not kind of continuously going back to what the Bible is saying about how to judge people in a more healthy way, or judge anything in a more healthy way, then we're definitely walking down into that road of, well, now I'm sinfully judging things around me.
Right. And it's easy to end up there, So.
Yeah, I think for me what stood out was the reality of we have to assume that our sins, or I would have to assume that my sin is more serious than the person I'm judging. It doesn't mean I don't have the right to judge that person if they call themselves a Christian and we're trying to spur one another on to love and good works and to righteousness. But as I do it, I realize I have to, like the text says, take the plank out of my own eye before I can help take the speck out.
The specks and planks need to be dealt with.
Yeah, specks and planks.
Yeah.
Well, that could have been a cool sermon title.
Could have been a cool sermon title. Yep.
Or a book title right there. There you go, Sage. Write that one up. But yeah, and then the word hypocrite, like the idea of being an actor.
Yeah.
It's a theater word of you're just playing.
Right.
Like you're pretending to be someone you're not. Like it's pretty harsh to be like to just put that on someone. Jesus, like, you're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
You're being an actor. You're a play person.
Right.
and so deal with your sin, which is very serious, before you deal with help someone remove the little tiny sin they have.
Right.
Sin perspective.
Yeah. And along with that, I like the point that he made at the very end, that quote from Timothy Keller, where when it comes to removing those specks, even in a real world sense, if we're going to carry that metaphor out literally, you don't do it clumsily. You do it with extreme gentleness. I think he said exquisite gentleness, And the same holds true, metaphorically, when we're dealing with each other. There's a great degree of care and grace and gentleness that goes into moments like that. So.
Well, I think that's what Jesus uses the eye there. You think about it, right? Like anytime like you're like laying down and you're opening your eye, if you can see me, I'm like literally spreading my eyelids apart. Like you're so vulnerable to whoever's getting close with whatever contraption they have or whatever liquid they have. The other day I had my eyes were kind of red because of allergies, and I asked Sarah to do the eye drops into my eyes, and I was just like, as they get closer, you try to like shut your eye even though you're holding it open, and it makes sense of like she doesn't just jam the eye wash, the drops in there and just start scrubbing it. Like she is very gentle, one little drop. But,
exactly.
And I think that's the point of like, if you're gonna help remove a speck from someone's eye, like because they can't see it too.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have we ever had something in our eyes and like, hey, can you see? Is there an eyelash in there? Is there like something like? You're trusting someone to get that close to like an area of your like a body part that is very
super sensitive.
Yeah.
It can make you go blind if you're forceful. All right, so let's up the ante a little bit. What challenged you? We can ask Daniel first.
I will happily go first on this one. So as part of the message, Tony talked about when it comes to judgment, there are two areas where we tend to mess up. And he drew them. I don't remember the author's name, but there's a particular author he was sort of drawing these examples from. And he said the first where we can screw up is a failure of nerve, and the second is a failure of heart. And he meant by failure of nerve, having some sort of internal convictions and beliefs, but not being able to hold on to them strongly enough to stand up for something and to express a judgment. You know, the inability to stand up and say, that's wrong, or this is wrong, or whatever. Or the opposite end of the spectrum, the failure of heart, the ability to stand up and to distinguish and to judge, but the inability to do it caringly or gently, you know, gently, with gentleness, to, you know, treating it like,
Gently.
yeah, like an issue of the eye or something like that with care. And for me, that was challenging because, not that I needed reminding, but for me, Tony was a good example, and he held himself up well as a person who struggles with the failure of heart. I'm on the other end of the spectrum, where in many, many things, perhaps strangely enough, I don't know how well people know me, but I'm a pretty big guy, 6'4" and about 260 pounds. I'm not a small man. But in most things, I'm genuinely fairly timid. And the failure of nerve is absolutely the one that I lean toward most in those two things. And especially when it comes to issues of judgment, I absolutely default more toward keeping silent and quieting my convictions and not expressing those things and not externalizing judgments. And part of that has to do with my personality. Part of it has to do with my history. I remember there was one story when I was in college, where there was a particular friendship where this friend of mine had some unhealthy behaviors in their life, and I was dealing with some pressure from other well-meaning Christians in my life to confront that person about their behavior, and was really kind of bullied into it, badgered into it. I don't know what to call it exactly, but I ended up confronting this friend, and because I was so insecure about it and coming from a place of unhealth, I ended up mishandling it, you know, quite a bit. And thankfully, God's been faithful, and that relationship has been since restored. But there were a number of years there where this friend and I did not speak to each other because of that. And so there's this part of me that is like, not only do I personality-wise struggle with that failure of nerve, but there's also a part of my brain that reaches back and goes, am I going to mishandle this again? If I stand up and like hold forth and actually hold to a judgment, am I going to damage another friendship again or something like that?
I wonder too if part of that is where Tony was talking about the perception of Christians, where like we're known for being judgmental and for having these strong opinions, and I wonder if that's part of it also, is that then, well, maybe I need to hold back a little bit on what I'm sharing if people view Christians as judgmental.
Because of how it might appear. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see there's a pushback recently of just talking about, like, the love of God has been, like, for the last 15 years-ish. Like, you know, you can go to some churches, they'll never talk about the gravity of sin.
Right.
And what sin really does to the human person, and yet they want to talk about love, love, love. I don't know if it's a way to try to... Man, Tony was mentioning how scholars and pastors have really trying to write, to contrast or to go against all these negative perceptions. Maybe that's why. I think for me, what challenged me is that idea of, like, after I remove my speck or my plank, then I don't just point out the speck. I have to now be a part of the process, the tender, gentle, exquisite gentleness of taking it out.
Yeah.
And the idea of not having a mirror, and like just the reality of the person is really lost.
Yeah.
And it's almost easier that you have a plank in a way of like, this is okay, I know what I'm dealing with, but like you have to, like, it's harder to be very gentle to help someone walk through, really walk them through the coming out of that, or the casting away of the sin.
In some ways, big splinters are much easier to remove than tiny, tiny splinters are. So
takes more energy.
Yeah.
What challenged you, Shayna?
Really, it was that quote at the end, that Timothy Keller quote. I'll go ahead and read it, just in case anybody didn't get to see.
Yeah.
But if someone has a speck in their eye, you don't try to pull it out with a crowbar. You don't even attempt to do it with tweezers. You remove the speck with exquisite gentleness. That is how we judge, with exquisite gentleness. And to me, I relate this a lot with my kids, because I always want them to feel like they can come to me with anything, and that I'm not going to judge them harshly, that I'm not going to treat them poorly if they've done something wrong. And so for me, I want to learn how to connect with Jesus in a way that is going to help me be gentle with my kids so that they do feel comfortable doing that, and that they can then learn how to be gentle with others also.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's really hard with boys, and I mean, you guys know all about this. That it's really hard to how do I teach my boys to be manly men, but also gentle at the same time and caring for others, and how do we blend all of that together is a big challenge.
Yeah, it is a tough balance because there's so many societal pressures that go into that as well, and just that there's a tendency here in the West and in America in particular to teach men to really that it's not okay to be vulnerable, that it's not okay to be open and to be cared for, to have help removing those specks and things like that, and being able to, Brandon and I both have boys. We are boys. We grew up in that, and like
I'm a man now, though. I'm a man.
Going through that process, and exactly, like trying to teach our sons and the other people, and to some degree, this extends obviously to women as well.
Of
but
course,
just the human process of how do we learn to do this well, because it's not easy. So
I think it's the first part is being in a community that like is safe to have those vulnerabilities, because I think I was taught at a young age I think when I was in 7th grade in a youth group to be able to be vulnerable and to share the things I was struggling with, and people were open and willing to to listen and to like pray with me about it. I remember that, like the huge moments on a houseboat in my little small group. I remember my youth pastor was my leader, and then there were 2 other guys with me, and we were all like crying, and like they're in high school and middle school, we were crying because we wanted like to be more like Christ, and
those are
sharing
so
all those things.
Important. Those moments are so crucial to be able to have, and especially for young people.
And I saw like my leader, like the youth pastor, was the one leading that, and I saw that from a man. Was showing that, and it
so
was
important.
Yeah, it was very, very good.
Yeah.
So we normally ask the speaker to, at this point, elaborate, or the preacher to elaborate on where they would have gone a little bit more deeper or spend a little more time if they had it. We know Tony isn't here, but I'm sure with all the good feedback from the Timothy almost said Queller too, the Timothy Keller quote, Tony, I think you're pretty good to start to continue sharing Timothy Keller. He always, everything is, I read a book about Timothy. Timothy Keller wrote this book, and that's like all he says. So, Tony, yes, you can keep using that because it's clearly a hit.
Because Tim Keller needed some validation from us.
Well, Tony likes that, so good to use him, Tony.
Yeah.
All right, so we wanted to do something different today, and so we brought Shayna on because of the impact of VBS and Vacation Bible Schools. We wanted to have Shayna come on. We asked her, and she said yes, so she's here. And we want to throw around some questions. I don't know, Daniel, if you want to start.
I would love to start because first off, I just want to say Vacation Bible School obviously is been a thing that churches have done for years and years and years, decades and decades. And it's, I don't know, for people that haven't had a chance to be involved, it can be a really beautiful thing and a really awesome thing. So first off, I just wanted to say, Shayna, thank you for the role that you have played here at the church as the kids ministry director, and for making VBS happen this year in the way that you did and the work that you put in. Just thank you for helping to facilitate it happen, and thank you for loving our kids in the way that you have. It's such a gift that to have you and your heart and your leadership in that regard. So I wanted to start by saying thank you.
We'll have the DJ hit the applause button.
Yeah.
The background crowd.
As we pause for people to cheer. Exactly. So for those who maybe aren't familiar with VBS and what it looks like and what goes into it, who've never been to one, who've never volunteered before, can you give them like an overview of what a typical night looks like? How does it start? How does it end? What does it look like for the kids who are involved as they come?
Yeah, so as far as the structure goes, I mean, we started each evening this last week with just all the kids coming into the sanctuary. There was fun lights, loud music. We had beach balls everywhere.
Those were so fun. They were huge.
They were huge. It was really just a lot of fun. And then Once we actually kind of officially kicked off the night, Brandon was our host last week, so thank you for doing that. But he got to lead us in just a really fun game each night, kind of loosen the kids up, get some energy going. Then we moved into a time of worship, and then the kids got to watch their Bible story for the evening. And then everything after that large group time is designed to support that Bible story and just really kind of drive that point home. So after the kids transition out of that large group time in the sanctuary, they would move into their rotation. So we had a missions rotation, a snack rotation, an outdoor game rotation that were all led by spectacular people.
Cool.
And then the kids and their small group leaders would get to go back to their classroom for just that last little portion of the evening, and that is a really impactful time for the kids because that's the time when they get into deeper discussion, they get into more activities that are really specific to the Bible story and how can they be applying it in their daily lives and things like that. So that's a really wonderful time for the leaders and the kids to be relating in a more intimate way.
So it's not childcare then.
And that's what I was just going to say. So because there is that sort of misconception that VBS is really just a glorified childcare. And as you were just describing, it is much more intentional ministry, designed for, appropriate to kids. But really that is the heart behind it, for them to encounter Jesus in a meaningful and life-changing way and not just babysitting.
Yeah, and there's lots of opportunity for that in the evening because they're going and interacting with all of these different people who are there specifically to support them growing in their faith.
Yeah. Cool. So can you tell us any stories from this last week maybe that stuck out to you, or moments where you saw that happening in a genuine way? Were there moments or stories maybe with kids or maybe with volunteer leaders that you saw where you thought, okay, yes, this person is having, like, God is talking to them. There is something happening here.
Well, I saw over the course of the week as Matt and Jamie were leading worship during the week, the kids were just getting so much more expressive and excited during the time of worship. They really, I really feel like the Spirit was moving and that they were really experiencing Jesus in a new way. And I mean, the whole week we were talking about confidence and not just like I feel good about myself, but as Brandon knows really well, that it's seeing yourself the way that God sees you.
Yeah.
Yep, said that every night.
Yeah. And just I think that they really were taking that to heart and really connecting in such a way that they were getting more excited about as the week went on.
That's really cool.
I did notice an element I want to share is I remember one of the nights the kids were up front jumping around and kind of going crazy, and really it was my child and a couple other kids. And I saw one of the leaders kind of go over and try to it sounds wrong, but I'm going to get into this. But kind of like be the bad guy and bring the kids back to the chairs, and I made a note of that to talk to you about it. And I think I might have said something, but the very next day, that leader came to talk to you about it, and she was saying to you how don't want to be the bad guy. She even used that language, and I was thinking she's like, I just want these kids to love and worship God, and I don't want to hinder all of that. So God was clearly working on her heart, and the kids were fine the rest of the time. It just kind of needed they needed some guidance of hey, we're not going to be on the stairs, but you can jump and have fun and get into the songs. So they're kindergarten to first graders, so to squelch that now would be and she realized that, and she said, I went home and I've just been praying about it and worried about so I don't know, it was cool. And then she spoke with you about it, and it gave her some confidence to lead and to grow in that area. And I thought you handled that well. And I thought it was great to see someone go hey, I want these kids, I don't want to be a hindrance, and I want them to have fun. And for her to learn that just in one night, rather than, because I've seen people volunteer who are just every night that's how they are, because there needs to be order, and there needs to be, you can't be, I'm these are kids, and she got it. And I thought that was cool that you were able to talk to her in the, in her little 242 room and walk her through that.
Our leaders are fantastic about that, just willing to go with the flow, and they really want to see kids growing in Jesus, and they really want to see how that time impacts the kids. Yeah.
That's awesome, and it's exciting to hear. So for those of you who aren't familiar with VBS, at least here at our church and how it functions, that's really like the snapshot of the heart of VBS that I would want people walking away from, that perspective that says, this is what we're about. Yeah. We're about kids meeting Jesus and having genuine experiences, life-changing experiences where they walk away as different, more transformed human beings, even at a young age than they were. So
even my 3-year-old, I was like, "What'd you learn at VBS?" And he was like, "Jesus died on the cross for me." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Oh!" Like he even said that at 3. And then I was like, "Yeah, okay." And he was like, "Yeah." And God loves me. And then I was like, "Oh, like really?" And he was like, so I mean, he's even learning that at 3. So it's huge. And so
we had a little girl in the preschool room who, at the beginning of the week, was a little bit defiant with things, and she would sit, like one of the leaders would ask, "Who loves you?" in prompt, and the response is supposed to be, "Jesus loves me." Right. And this little girl kept saying, "Nope." Nope. But by the end of the week, she was like, "Jesus loves me."
There you go. That's some growth.
That's cool.
It was funny.
So the night was 6 to 8, Monday through Thursday. Mm-hmm. So 8 hours of VBS. How many hours behind the scenes in prep time did you log? Because I know you're logging them, but also like how much time do you think total goes into putting on 8 hours?
I mean, countless. Are you asking in the 1 week prior, 2 weeks prior, a number of weeks prior?
Yeah, I guess the point I'm getting at is like this isn't just you come in and plug and play, because I mean we were the week before, my wife Sarah was here helping you decorate,
multiple days.
I was here helping her doing taping, and then the day of, like several of us were here kind of doing the final little touches, and really all to kind of bring the experience together.
Yeah, no, this is weeks and weeks of preparation. Normally this is 6 months plus of preparation. I mean, 6 months ago we were barely meeting you, and we weren't even sure because of COVID if we were going to be able to have VBS.
This year's been a little different.
Yeah, so it was on hold for a little while, and so this was a lot more scrunched together in time. But yeah, typically it's about 6 months of planning ahead of time and getting teams together, and there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. How many volunteers helped out?
This year we had about 40 volunteers.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. In years past, we've had as many as 60 or more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And this really was kind of a turn on the dime. Like, I was like, yeah, you guys can go ahead and do it. And you're like, okay. And it was kind of like, here we go.
Yeah.
And, we've been trying to implement some calendar meetings. That kind of helps. But, yeah, with COVID and everything opening up, you kind of don't
so
really
many
know,
questions. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So this is one thing I've been wanting to ask you. So you had missions involved.
Yeah.
Because I've led VBS in different churches. I've been a VBS kid for a long time. Still remember the, Pharaoh, oh baby, let my people go. From back when I was a little kid, talking about Moses. Obviously now that I'm older, but so why include a missions aspect?
Well, we've actually included missions in our VBS for the last several years. But this year I was particularly excited to include it because we have some missionaries who recently have come home from their designated countries. Mm-hmm. And I was very excited to let them have the opportunity to kind of share what they've been doing and how kids can be involved in that, and how kids can be part of this global impact as far as Christ is concerned, and how can we be, so their specific topic was translation, and how does that impact kids here, but also kids globally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bible translations. My 6-year-old came home and said, there's a lot of people in the world don't have a Bible, Dad. I'm like, oh, so you're learning from, I overheard a little bit, but oh, wow. So
yeah, just helping them be aware, too, of the fact that so many people don't have a translation that they can read. And
yeah.
I mean, it's just remarkable to be reminded that there are so many things that there are conversations that kids are ready to have. And it's got to be had at their level, but there are things that they're ready to talk about, that they're ready to understand. And nobody's too young for Jesus. Nobody's too young to understand, and to benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think VBS is a great chance for outreach and for like inviting people who don't necessarily attend Springfield Faith Center. Maybe have never even been to church. Maybe they're called unchurched. They just the whole being in a church facility or being around other people who have this faith might be a new thing to them. How many people do you think, or do you have any stories of people who maybe weren't involved with our church regularly but came this last week because of the fact that we're having something? And what were some of the outreach kind of moments that you can remember?
Well, I think we may have had a couple who were unchurched, but the majority of the people who came were not just believers, but from our church.
Oh, okay.
But I just love that we got the opportunity to kind of present this to the community and just open it up as, hey, this is something that our church is offering, and our doors are open.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we did have some kids come who were from other churches, but their churches weren't offering anything like this, anything like the opportunity to kind of unplug for a week and really spend time in that kind of discipleship atmosphere with and just the intimacy that comes along with being in a small group at VBS. And so just the opportunity to kind of open our doors and get some more visibility. I don't know if that will change who comes on Sunday mornings, or maybe they'll look at coming next year to VBS, but it's exciting to offer something to the community.
And I know that my oldest son was actually blessed by that. We didn't get a chance to go because my family was out of town this last week. But one of the little girls who came this last week, her family attends a different church, but theirs, exactly like you said, didn't have a VBS. And so they came here instead. And she's a little girl from his class at school at Ridgeview Elementary.
Okay.
That had been doing school online with him this last year. And my mother was there teaching this week, and she heard Mom's last name and knew it was the same as my son's last name, and went and asked her and said, "Are you related to Lachlan?" And she said, "Yes, I'm his grandmother." And so this little girl was excited because she wanted to see Lockie. They'd been classmates, and he wasn't there this week. But she went to my mom and said, "Can you please tell him hi for me? And I missed him, and wish he could have been there." And so Lachlan heard about that, and he was super blessed by having like that moment and knowing that she was thinking about him and just like that awareness. And so even for us, we weren't there. My son was still touched through that element of outreach and the opportunity for other people to be there and be a part of that. So,
oh, that's so sweet.
Well, our neighbor came too, and she's the same age as my son, going into first grade, so they were in their class together, and it's kind of funny. Like, they asked a question, "Anyone in here 7 years old?" And my son said, "I'm 7," and he just turned 6, so he lied. Good pastor kid, but like in the group, like our neighbor was like, "Liam, you're not 6, or you're not 7. You're not 7." Like I was waiting for her to say, "I was just at your birthday party," or whatever. But it was fun to have. She doesn't go to our church. I know they're part of another church around here, but it was great to hear that even someone in my cul-de-sac was here, and that has actually strengthened our friendship in our neighborhood. So
very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so one last thing, like what was like one of the most fun things about VBS, if you can think about a memory or something that was really fun about it?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things. Probably one of the best things was one of the nights during worship, Matt and Jamie were talking about why we raise our hands during worship and just worshiping the Lord. And getting to see these kids put their hands up was so amazing. They were just so sweet. And just to see that, you can see the joy on their face when they're worshiping God, and just, it's so wonderful. But other than that, having you as host was so much fun. The kids loved your crazy outfit.
Hey, a couple runs at the thrift stores around town. Yeah, you got everything you need.
That's all it takes.
There's something powerful about having a lead pastor who's passionate about getting in there and being part of the kids' ministry and the kids' lives, and that speaks something of tremendous value to the kids in the church.
Yeah.
So.
I was noticing one of the nights, like, kids were kind of not paying attention and not clapping, and I'm like, okay, I know that if I go up there and being kind of my role, and if I start clapping, or one time they didn't ask me to come up and do hand motions, so I was like, all right, I'll go up and do it, and it's interesting to see them respond. So I was like trying to model, like, rather than just kind of going, okay, I can take this next couple minutes off to get ready for my next line, I was like, no, I need to be up there, and because I want them to have the fun and experience, and I want them to get into it. And so it was cool to see them all clapping and responding.
That was
Very
great.
cool.
I thought one of the fun things was just, like you said, seeing the kids like being joyful to be here.
Yeah.
And just running around before with those big beach balls and doing the games, and seeing all the kids run around playing tag or whatever, and just seeing kids be kids again.
Yeah.
I think, because the last couple of years they really haven't.
Yeah.
So.
We had so many fun moments. Jamie Lenhart led worship for the preschoolers, and I think it was the second night he did Father Abraham, and Matt ended up getting a video of him, and it was online. It was hilarious to watch all the kids. So cute. So the next day, Jamie goes to lead worship again for the preschoolers, and he's got this huge following of adults who want to come and watch him. Everyone wants to see what Jamie was doing.
So VBS is a good place for adults to bond.
Yeah,
and friendship as you're serving with people. I mean, you get to see those moments and connect. And, And if you haven't seen our video, it's on our Facebook page. You don't have to have Facebook, but if you just go to Facebook and search Springfield Faith Center on Google, you can find the video and watch it. There's like a 3-minute video, kind of giving a recap. So.
Totally worth watching. So, yep.
All right.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and finish up. I'm going to read us the section of Scripture that Tony spoke from this last weekend. So Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. It says, "Do not judge so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye."
Wow. It's a good word. Amen. Shayna, thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah,
and
thank you so much.
If you're out there, give her a hand right now.
Yay.
I can hear it. Yay,
Yep,
yay,
yep.
Shayna. All right, we'll see you guys on the next one.
Have a great week.
All right.